Hello and welcome to this episode of The Inner Estate with your host, Bridget Stewart. My guest today is Talor Stewart. It's the House of Stewart today. Talor, thank you so much for being our guest.
Hi, Bridget. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. You are an architect, have been for decades, an author, and you are someone who has really leaned in on how design and conscious design in particular can actually impact people's happiness, their day-to-day life, and their success overall. That sounds amazing to me. Could you share a little bit more in your own words? What does that mean? What are we going to talk about today?
Yeah, sure. Great. So a lot of architecture is style driven. Obviously, there's an initial need for shelter. So it begins in this very fundamental, basic way of like, hey, we got to keep the rain off, other protections, against the world that we live in. It really comes down to, once you've achieved shelter, people are looking for personality, right? And so a lot of design is style focused, personal preferences and aesthetics. After, I always knew I was going to write a book, even from my early college days, but it actually took me 20 years of practice and being in the industry before all of my ideas gel into, a system, a methodology that was that I could share and that was more universal. I wanted to root things in science rather than personal preference. Of course, is going to achieve their personal preference. You're going to get a style you like. You're going to get, textures and finishes and paint colors and things that you like. But
Right.
if you have the most beautiful, expensive, find, museum quality home, but it's not actually supportive of the way you want to live, then, it's not a good fit, right? And so
Absolutely.
I wanted to look at things that were more universally applicable before we look at the things that are personally applicable and going through that, things that we all need in our lives, just as human beings, So yeah, so that's what conscious home design is. It's not really a style per se. It's not, committed to a certain building material, like, oh, it's going to be alternative or eco-friendly. It can be, but it can also work for conventional homes.
Mhm.
And it's not a style where you'd go driving down through your neighborhood and go, "Oh, conscious home design." It's
Right.
invisible that way, right? Whether you want a modern or a mid-century or a classical or anything in between, whether it's a cottage or a castle, any size, any style, it's about shaping the space to really facilitate the lifestyle. True, the things that we know make us happy, and actually the data statistically shows that people will actually live longer when we do these things. So that's what it's
Wow.
rooted in.
Okay. So this could impact longevity.
Absolutely. Yeah, the
Right.
data strongly supports it. And when I was researching to write the book, like I said, it took me 20 years to get there. Originally, I was calling the book Green Picket Fence, and I had I trademarked the Green Picket Fence. I registered the domain. And so for about a year, that was my working title, and I was really sure that that's where I was gonna go. I was gonna plant my flag and be like, living the new American dream in a custom designed eco-friendly home,
Mhm.
as building off of the white picket fence kind of
Right.
storybook. As I brought all of my notes from the decades, even going back to papers I wrote in college, to what I learned yesterday, just on my own personal development stuff and everything in between, waking up at 3 a.m. with an inspiration and just, I assembled it all and I had about a 50-page Google Doc with all my downloads into this wild nebula of stuff.
Right.
And I was like, I had been staring at thing and trying to make sense of it for months, and I was like, I couldn't find my way through the maze of all this data and information. I talked with someone I know who's done professional editing in the past, and she said, "Well, why don't you take all of your, each idea that is its own idea and write it on a 3 by 5 index card and lay it out on the table and try to arrange them so that it follows a storyline, a story arc, and so that there's the sequence, right?" And I thought, "Oh, this is great," because it takes all these concepts, what makes them visual, and
Right.
geometric, and
Right.
this is speaking my language now as an
And even
architect.
tangible. 'cause you're holding the card. So there was
That's
even a
true, that's
tangible
true, yeah,
element.
right, so I was able to take all of this data and transform it or integrate or interact with it at a different level, a
Right.
tactile level, but also a geometric level, and so, changing that shift in perspective was it was a breakthrough for me, and so the first thing I realized was when I wrote everything down is I thought, "Oh my god, there's 42 index cards here." I thought no one is gonna read a 42 chapter book on architecture. Boring, and
Not
so I
even
said,
an architect is gonna read that, right? Yeah.
right, the goal I said, "I'm not writing a textbook here." My audience is not architecture students, or
Right.
enthusiasts. My goal is to write something extremely potent, but accessible, something you can read in an hour. Mark Twain was once joking with a friend in a letter. He said, "I would have wrote a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time." And I spent the time to really refine it down and get it to make it just bite sized. You can read the whole book in an hour. It's just very and you don't have to know anything about it. I'm not talking jargon. You might not know the difference between one wall and another, but it's still, you'll walk away with like totally eyes open, like,
And I wanna interrupt you there for 1 second. So this
yeah,
you were not writing a book for a classroom or an architect. You were writing it for every human that enjoys living in a shelter. This is really for a human that lives in a property, whether they own it or not, and how
correct.
they could create a space that's going to impact how they feel every day. Am I capturing that?
That is exactly hitting the nail on the head. I wrote this book with the intention of having it be a bridge between the profession and the non-design community. Because, just because the profession of architecture, it's very esoteric, it's very mysterious. People don't get behind the scenes to see what we do. People see the pictures, the drawings, blueprints, and nice renderings that we do, and they know, okay, it's got to be structural and permitting and technical. So they know there's an
Right,
artistic side, but also a technical side. But still, it's so much more than that. That's not well understood. And so I wanted to, have this book as sort of like an ambassador, help people put it to work for them, even if they're never going to hire an architect. The truth is most
right,
people won't hire an architect. It's much more expedient to just find something that's already built and move into it.
yeah,
It's not the delay, right? So,
right.
but that doesn't mean that people can't learn from an architect. I believe that understanding how your environment influences us on a daily basis is like an essential life skill, just like knowing how to dress for the occasion or dress for the weather, right? Or prepare a well-balanced meal. This will help it. We spend so much time in our homes. Half of our lives is
Yes,
spent in our homes. It really plays a big impact. Winston Churchill said, you probably are familiar with the quote, "We shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us."
they shape
And
us, that's
so
right.
yeah, we wanna shape our buildings in a way that so they influence us, positively, so they shape us in the direction we wanna go. It's like, that you don't wanna have a super fancy pair of shoes that are, high quality, but don't fit, right? You want
That's
because
right,
otherwise it's gonna give you bunions or what, it's gonna be
that's right.
problems. So your home, you want it to fit, as well as it possibly can. So that's the message. So I had to so initially I was talking about green picket fence. It was like 42 chapters, and I said, "This is ridiculous. I've got to find something else to do here." And as I was exploring it, I realized that my core message is so much deeper than just eco-friendly design. And there's so many people who've out there who've planted their flag in that world. They've already
Right,
mastered it. And I didn't feel like competing or limiting myself to that because whether you maybe you're living in an apartment and you have no control over how sustainably built that was, and so
right.
but you do have control over influencing that environment so that it works to your benefit. And so I had to pivot to and come up with conscious home design as my book. And
Well, I'm glad you did because I feel as if conscious home design is going to have a broader impact on a bigger audience. It's just going to be more accessible for more people.
exactly, I wanted to have a broader field of impact. It was more, it, it was deeper than just, green design or eco-friendly design. Universally, there are things that are universally applicable to all people. Once you've attained shelter, if you're homeless, that's a very challenging, difficult situation to be, because it's hard to take control of your destiny if you can't take control of your environment. And so the ability to shape your environment helps you, you know, exponentially more easily reach your goals. So, think about Leonardo da Vinci, the most famous painting in the world, the Mona Lisa. He painted that 500 years ago, but it actually took him more than a decade to complete the painting, and he worked on it little by little. This really exemplifies the truth that all of our amazing human achievements, from science, from medicine, to art, to technology, they're all made possible by architecture. When we're able to control our environment and dedicate space to an activity, we're allowed to build. It enables us to build on yesterday's achievements. Because if you
Yes,
didn't do that, you'd just be able to accomplish whatever you could on a sunny afternoon. Because as soon as the weather changed, or night came and wild animals came, or neighbor tribes came in and mess everything up, it would all be lost, right?
that's right.
So,
That's right.
Da Vinci was able to, work on the Mona Lisa when inspiration hit, or when he had gaps between other paying projects, commissions that he was doing, and then he would come back to it little by little over more than a decade. He finally completed the painting, and that was, you know, obviously made so much easier because he has a dedicated art studio where he can keep his work ready to go when the time is right. If he didn't have an art studio, and his art studio was actually his dining room, and every time it was time for dinner, he had to clean everything up
Move
and put away,
everything. Yeah.
a lot of friction there, right? It's a lot of lost effort and time, and it's difficult so we want to be able to dedicate space to our endeavors, whatever they may be, because it's going to help us succeed. And so, in my research for the book, and I was still thinking at the time I was going to call it Green Picket Fence, but I came across the Harvard study of adult happiness, which began in 1938 and
Right.
is still going on to this day, right? So it's like 87 years later, this thing is still going on. They have studied thousands of individuals, and it initially started with a little over 2,000 people back in 1938. They were all over 18, college age, and what they did is they did an initial assessment. Hey, who are you? What kind of background do you come from? Where do you live? Do you come from money? Do you come from poverty? Do you have struggles? What are you choosing for careers and stuff? And how's your physical health? What's your current condition? And then once they had a nice snapshot, sort of the avatar of all these thousands of people, they then tracked them for their whole lives,
Right.
and periodically would check in and re-up and redo the assessment, and see how they progressed. And all the original people have now passed on, obviously, because do the math, they're all
Right.
well over 100. And so, but
Yes.
they're on to second and third generation, subsequent generations now, because the study is still active. It's the largest of its kind in the world, longest and largest running. The results, what they came up with, after 80 years, of 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 running the study, when I first found out about it 7 years ago, is they they found that regardless of people's, health challenges or career changes or business successes or failures, the ups and downs and twists and turns of life that we all go through in our own way, they found that the single biggest predictor of life expectancy and how happy people reported they were, feelings of fulfillment. Oh, I've been living a rich life, was tied to the quality of their relationships.
Right.
And so, I think we all sort of intuitively know that. Yes, I do everything I do for my family. And I love the weekend because I get to hang out with my friends and family and my loved ones. And, that's sort of our reason for living. Yes, is for the connection time.
Yes.
But having the math behind it so now it's not like a wish list item, but suddenly it's like, oh, we have hard data that says
Data.
you'll
I
live
love
longer,
data. Right.
statistically, if you do this. It's like, oh, okay, and now that justifies us to truly prioritize it in our lives. And so, as an architect, I was like, whoa, this is the single biggest predictor of longevity and happiness. Stop the press. We can't. This is because this is the highest calling of architecture. The highest calling of architecture is to help people reach their potential or grow into their own possibilities, right? And live happily ever after. We even, we wrote it into our Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. We want to be happy. We want to have joy
Right.
in our
That's
life.
right.
This is this is the purpose of architecture, is to help people find that joy and that happiness. So, I pivoted and said, okay, this is now we're really getting to the meat, the core, the kernel at the core of this issue. Yeah. And the Harvard study was very clear about relationships, and they said this is not, we're not just talking about romantic partnerships. This isn't your dating life or your marriage life. You can
That's
be
right.
single and have a long, happy, rich life. Yeah.
Yes.
So when I decided, okay, well, I've got to camp out here, I really have to understand this more deeply, so that I can better serve clients and the world at large. um I started researching, going down the relationship rabbit hole, and it turns out the Greeks have 7 different words for love based on how, the type of relationship it is, whether it's parent and child or
Right.
friends or lovers or between a person and their community, whether we're calling it agape or filial or eros or storge and et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera. And so that was a nice start, but that wasn't enough. I wanted to keep going, and so as I found all these different kinds of relationships that we have, the myriad diverse, interactions that we experience in life from childhood through old age, I found that all of our relationships are going to fall into one of 3 broad categories, and those are
Okay, good. Okay.
our giving, receiving, and reciprocal relationships. And
Giving,
so,
receiving, and reciprocal.
right.
Excellent.
And if I think, you're welcome to challenge me, but if you can think of any kind of relationship that doesn't fall into one of those 3 categories, feel free to share it with me, even a year later, email me, "Hey, Taylor, what about this one?" I'm happy to expand, because I'm always learning and growing. But so from
Right.
what I found, everybody is gonna fit into one of 3 categories. And so let's give, some examples. I'll define giving, receiving, and reciprocal, yeah?
Yes.
Examples of giving relationships are the ones where we show up as the primary giver. The first initiated action is us giving. And so that's going to be relationships that we have with anyone that we are teaching or mentoring or coaching, children that we're raising or looking after or babysitting. And that's also going to extend, you know, beyond our human relationships to, plants and animals, our pets, and if we don't have pets, even if you have a bird feeder outside, then, that's, a giving relationship.
As I speak to
And
you, I have plants to the
yeah.
left of me and a dog to the right.
Yes, that's right. Our lives are richer for it. Yes. So, and of course, everyone says, well, I receive more than I give. It's so much the way it is, with whether you're cultivating your flowers or your vegetables or your pets, and this is true that every relationship has some sort of energetic, exchange. There's always a giving and a receiving of all of our relationships. But for the sake of categorizing, because once you can identify, you can then measure and quantify, and that helps us, plan our life. So for the sake of identifying, it's a giving relationship at the face of it. Yes. And then, what happens after that, that's just the magic of being alive and being human. But
Right.
at first there are giving relationships. So a reciprocal relationship is one like you and I are having right now, where we are, peers, are standing on equal footings. We're having a conversation. I don't have to show up like a role model, as I would
Right.
where with a child, that I was teaching and trying to exemplify a type of behavior or something. So I can be a little bit more forthcoming or natural or casual, let my hair down, and we can just have you know, it's a different
Conversation.
quality of interaction. Yeah. When
Right.
so it's with your peers, with your colleagues, with your friends, with your spouse. anything where there's that give and take and it's a reciprocal, even exchange kind of relationship. And then we have our receiving relationships where we are the primary beneficiary of someone else's care and love and attention. And so these are the relationships we have with our parents and elders and ancestors, with our coaches and mentors and teachers, and with our even with our heroes and spiritual figures that we get guidance or inspiration from. Anyone who's going to support us and remind us to show up, as ourselves or be our best self or stretch, reach into our possibility and into our potential. And we all need some balance of all three kinds of relationship to have a well-rounded, rich, diverse life, a full life, a buffet life, where you've had a little sample of it all. You want to have all three kinds. However that looks like, however they show up, that's up to you. You get to choose your own adventure, but you want to have all three.
All 3.
So as we move through life, you're going to have different balances. Like in college age, you're just going to be getting a lot of receiving because you're going around to all your professors and classes. And any free time you have is going to be with your friends. It's going to be reciprocal stuff. You're going to be hanging out and partying or just learning, growing, socializing, right? Becoming,
Right.
finding out about yourself. Not a lot of giving relationships in that time period. Usually, some people do, but predominantly it's a very, but then shortly after people, they move on, they get a house, they start a family, and now they've got young children, and it's like giving, 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 giving
Giving. Yes.
24/7, right?
Yes.
And people are like, "Oh my God, if I could just get 1 hour a week of quality reciprocal time with a friend, so I can have some adult talk, it would just be, oh, thank you so much." So, as we go through life, we're going to experience different balances, but over the full scope of life, you want to have a good, healthy mix, right? So, as an architect, I found what would it look like, knowing that this is the single biggest predictor of happiness and, statistically life expectancy,
Right.
quality relationships and connections. How can I build it into the bones of our homes, so that it's not just shelter, but it's actually helping us not just survive, but thrive? I said, okay, we want to have opportunities for giving, receiving, and reciprocal relationships in every home. And then, I started taking it a little bit deeper, one step further, and I thought, what would it look like if we had opportunities for all three kinds of relationship, not just in the home, but in every room of your home?
Oh, wow. Okay.
How would that,
All right.
what kind of opportunities would that open up for you? What sort of
Mhm.
ripple effect would that send out into your life, into the world when you step forth? And so, um, to give people, tangible examples that they can
Love
apply in their own
examples.
situation, right? This
Yes.
is really where the rubber meets the road. Is I like to use an example, a room that we traditionally do not think of as a relationship building room, and that is the bathroom.
Mhm.
The bathroom is typically a private space where we're not thinking about cultivating relationships in the
Right.
world. It's where we go to get away, to have a moment alone, especially if you have young children that are clinging onto your leg 24/7 and you just need a 5-minute break. Or if you're an introvert like I am and you're at a party and you just need to go catch your breath for a second and recenter and
Yes.
reground and recharge, like the
Yes.
bathroom's a great place to there's a nice little haven to go. Or if you're at
Mhm.
home for the holidays and you're having Thanksgiving dinner and suddenly someone brings up politics.
Oops. Excuse me.
Good time to excuse myself and go to the bathroom.
Correct. Yes. To
Right? So the
protect the
bathroom is a
happiness. Yeah, to
fantastic
protect
place.
our happiness, that's when we have the bathroom break. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
It's typically something where we think of as it's a private space where we go to, either just do our business, just it's a very functional space, caring for the body, or a place, to also have a moment, a timeout for a
Yes.
second, to
To
center
rest. The
yourself.
rest room. It's when you need a rest.
Yes, right. So the thing is, it's actually a very, because of that, it's actually a very potent and ripe place to cultivate your connection, not just with yourself, but with others. And so here's what that can look like. Examples of giving relationship in the bathroom are, if you have a window, and many bathrooms do, not all, but many do it. If you have natural light coming in, then please, by all means, put a plant or two on the windowsill or in a shelf nearby or even hanging from the top of the window. And suddenly there's life in there. What's normally just a utility a dead utility space to go in and do your business and then get out, quickly. Now it becomes an opportunity like, oh, wow, it's one step more towards a garden or an oasis. Yes.
Right.
And science, research has shown us that no matter how beautiful a space is, and the science, the brain waves are clear. Chaotic, poorly designed, cluttered spaces spike, alpha waves in the brain and create confusion. And beautiful, well designed, not too cluttered, but attractive spaces, they spike the creative theta waves rather and stimulate peace and creativity and flow, right? And so we know that there's a mental response to our visual cues
Environment.
from the environment.
Yes.
But when we gaze upon green growing things, there's also a physiological response. Our breath becomes more regulated and deeper. Our heart rate slows and our blood pressure goes down. And this does not happen universally when we look at even in the most beautiful, built environment. Even a very beautiful home is not going to universally create that physiological response. You may intellectually say, "Oh, this is amazing," but it won't lower your blood pressure. But
Right.
looking at green things universally will lower people's blood pressure. Yeah, it's just a human physiological response because our bodies evolved in nature. We didn't evolve in buildings. Buildings is a new thing that humans invented, right? So, the body says, "Oh, green space. I'm in a natural environment. I'm at home. I'm safe." And so, putting that in there not only has some, proven physical benefits, but it also is cultivating that giving relationship. You have a chance to just very low maintenance once a week, take 3 steps from your sink with a cup of water, water the plant, pull off a leaf and say, "Hello, plant," and now there's
Right.
life in your bathroom.
Right.
Okay?
You know what? Can I share a bathroom story?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
Because it directly ties to what you're talking about, and I never connected this until just now. So I have a beautiful friend in Austin, Texas, Nina, and she and her husband, they entertain a lot, and they have an absolutely stunning, beautiful environment. And now that you're talking, I feel like they've incorporated things that you're discussing in their main bathroom that guests use. Every year, the January 1, they paint the walls a light color, and they have markers in the bathroom and throughout the entire year. Whomever is in their home using their bathroom writes on the wall or they do sketches on the wall, and the
Book.
bathroom has artwork. So I've been to many parties at their home, and guess what happens? People talk about the bathroom and they're like, "Oh my gosh, did you see that really cool sketch? Someone did a whole caricature," or "What did you
Mm.
write?" And then they're talking about and they're sharing their messages. They took their bathroom and they turned it into something where people feel connected, and it has nothing to do with the use of the room. But I'm going to call her. I'm going to make sure she listens to this because she's incorporated what you just described of could there be that opportunity for all the types of relationships, even in one of the most utilitarian of rooms that's typically private. And I
That
believe
is
she
so
did that.
beautiful. That is so fun. That's very creative and a
Yes.
really beautiful way to build those threads, the threads
Yes.
of your web, of your network, yeah, to stay connected with people. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I love it. For those people that don't have a window in their bathroom, their powder room or whatever, just put in a full spectrum light bulb. The plants will do okay with that. They can deal with it. They can still grow. With depending on what kind of plant
Right.
you have to choose a. You're not obviously growing a banana tree in your
Yeah. No.
in your bathroom, right? You got to choose climate appropriate, kind of conditions appropriate. But there are plenty of plants that you can put. In fact, on my website, you can get a free PDF download of the 5 best plants for indoor air quality.
Oh,
So anyone can go ahead and get that at
great.
conscioushomedesign.com. But put in a full spectrum bulb if you don't have an outside window. And then another, taking it one step further, how about putting a fishbowl in your bathroom, with a little goldfish or a beautiful betta fish with the long fins swimming around. And then when you come in, it's like there's life there. And it's like, oh, before you brush your teeth in the morning, you just sprinkle a little fish, and it's just that spark of joy, of happiness, of like, there's life in here. It's again very low maintenance, but it begins to expand your your heart and your world beyond yourself in such a simple way. And so I think we're all familiar with our reciprocal relationships in the bathroom. The traditional ones, especially if you look at the master bath, they have two sinks, a double bowl
Right.
sink very commonly, so that you can brush your teeth, side by side with someone. And if you desire this for your lifestyle and you have enough space, and it's within your budget, why not put in a big enough tub so you can soak, two people? Very romantic, and or even just for efficiency's sake, so you don't have to take turns. If you have a shower room with two heads on it, you can both, take care of the showering thing, simultaneously. And it's also nice,
Right.
just to it can be, to be together. So those are some examples of reciprocal relationships. You mentioned this beautiful one of having it be this living
Yeah.
graffiti wall,
Yeah.
in there that gets renewed every year. They can document it at the end of the
They do.
year and post that, and then repaint it and erase the slate, so to speak.
Mhm.
So that's another layer of richness that we can add into it. Thank you so much, Bridget, for sharing that. For our receiving relationships in the bathroom, I think many people are probably already doing something similar, but if you're not, take the opportunity to take a photograph or an image of someone that either you look up to, or someone that inspires you, or someone who loves you and encourages you, and put their image, near somewhere where you can look at it when you're brushing your teeth or washing your face and getting ready to go out into the world. Because, if you just take a moment, it's almost like a moment of being present rather than letting the mind just, because we've taken care of our bodies so many times that it becomes like a habit, and you can do it
Yes.
mindlessly. You can be doing the things you need to do, shaving or washing or whatever, and your mind can already be at work or into your appointment or what you're going to say to so and so. It's like you're not present in that moment.
Right.
So having that photo there, just giving yourself 5 or 10 seconds, don't worry, it's not going to rob your thoughts of the future or planning your day. Just take a moment to look at that and be reminded that someone wants the best for you. And from that reminder, it's like, now, how does that shift how you stand on your own 2 feet? Do you feel a little bit more capable or confident? Or do you feel like, well, I'm inspired to be my best, or to
Mhm.
show up a little bit more. And so, you know, blending that, what if you're in a, well, I want a picture of Jesus. Oh, well, my partner is Jewish or Buddhist, like if you can't agree on, on what to do, or if you can't agree to both have your own, thing to look at, then, or if it's too prominent, you don't want to have a big picture of someone in a public bathroom, like for your guests to look
Well,
at, you
unless
don't
it's
want to push
David
that on
Bowie.
someone
So if
else.
it's David Bowie, it can be life size. Other than that, it'd be too much.
Right. Sure. Right. Whatever is meaningful to you, absolutely. Whatever
Yeah.
is gonna cultivate that spark in you, that's
Mhm.
gonna make you, if it turns you up, if it turns you on, then, give it a go, right? But if you
Right.
don't wanna push that on someone else, then you can scale it back and say, "Well, what if I just had a quote, an inspiring quote that I put on the mirror?" And I can look at that and just say it once or twice, almost like an affirmation, to remind yourself. So it's a
Right.
very subtle way that you can reinforce that receiving relationship in your life. So, that's the bathroom. Go ahead and do an assessment, giving, receiving, and reciprocal. Go through your home and look where the opportunities are. Look where maybe there's some gaps, and say, am I okay with that, or do I want more support? And then you can start making some shifts. So, yeah.
I think that's good. And you did tackle, I think, the toughest room where most people would think that, well, it's not going to apply to, but with possible exception of the utility room. I don't know, the laundry, washer, and dryer, how you would do it there. But how would you incorporate that into, say, someone's bedroom? Because oftentimes I think your bedroom is sometimes it's even more private than, say, a shared bathroom. Especially if you live by yourself, because you probably have like the powder room that everyone uses, but your bedroom is very private. So, how could you just give some quick examples of how could you incorporate the three types of relationships in your own bedroom?
Sure. Well, it's very similar to the bathroom. I guess I could tell you, but part of me, I almost wanna toss that back to you because this is what I do with when I'm working with a client is it's not my job to tell you how to live. I actually wanna ask the quality of your result is determined by the quality of the questions. So my job is really to make sure we're asking the right questions so that when you show up with your wish list of this is what I want in a home, I make sure to ask the questions where there's gaps that you may have not known to ask about or overlooked. So I would say, Bridget, after what I just shared with you, what do you think, the
Well, I
bedroom
think
could
some of them would
look like?
repeat. Like, obviously, any, up to code bedroom is gonna have windows, right? So you'll have windows. I do think,
Sure.
obviously, you could have plants in them, which I do. And I have created an atmosphere that because when I think about my bedroom, I think about the 3 types of relationships within my own self, because we give to ourselves every day. We receive from ourselves every day if we choose to engage in a positive manner with our own subconscious. And then
Sure.
we are our own best friend. I always tell people, guess who you're spending the most time with in this life? You better like who it is. So I have created colors and a space and some art, which is very pleasing and very satisfying to me. And I feel as if people, when they do come into my bedroom, it's almost a reflection of what's important to me. So when they see my bedroom, I've had people say, like, oh, if I had to pick a bedroom that would describe you, this it was what it would look like. So I feel like part of my energy or my joy is reflected in how I have decorated the room,
Absolutely.
or what's in there. And there's a few things that reflect my passions. One of my dressmaker forms is in there, and I usually have it in
Okay.
some vintage outfit or a project I'm working on creating, right? So there's like things in
I
there that are also about me. So
Sure.
that I think would be sort of on that receiving when I'm being the giver and someone in there is receiving, they're receiving that I'm someone that is living some passion and creativity, even though I am known more for what I do at work, I'll say, right? So that I think it just shows that you're more than just what people see every day.
It is a very personal space, the bedroom, and not everybody gets to see it, yeah?
That's right.
But as there's thank you for sharing all of that. There's so much there. There's so many nuggets there, and each one of them is a conversation all by itself, and I'll touch on a few of them briefly as I can because, yeah, you've really opened up a whole, a whole new vista for us as we're adults, right? And so we've evolved a little bit more sophistication in the way we interact with one another, right? But even to this day, it's like think about, you know, going back to when you were a kid and your friends came over, "Hey, you wanna go see my room?" Like, we wanna
Right,
show
right.
it off, right? It's like
That's
this
right.
is just because it's an expression of it. It's an extension of us, right? It's the mind, body, environment connection. We know that it represents us, it's gonna
Right.
we're gonna influence it, and it's gonna influence us, and back, and so we're always sharing that with our friends. It's a piece of us that we like to show off to the right people, and so that doesn't change through life. We still wanna share our bedrooms. I think 99% of the people do with the right people in their,
Yes.
in their life, and so,
Yes.
um, if you are single and you have your room, then you have a little bit more freedom. Like, sometimes, when I'm working with couples, I'm talking about, the majority of my couples, same sex I've worked with same sex couples, of course, but the majority are hetero couples. And, just as a generic example, I like to use is, when they're coming together, it's like neither one of you want a space that both people will feel comfortable. We don't wanna make it be like Castle Grayskull He-Man, and we don't wanna make it Barbie Cloud Palace either, right? And so we have to find it from these 2 extremes, just to illustrate the point, you wanna find a way that both people are feeling comfortable there.
Right.
Whether it's a bedroom or any room in the house, especially if it's a community room, a room that you're sharing, whether it's the family room or the dining room, like, if one person is the driver behind the design and the style of it, it's like, oh, oftentimes you see, one partner deferring to the other. Okay, whatever you want, kind of thing. But that's not really gonna sow harmony, because if your goal is to have a space to connect with others, but the other people you live with don't feel comfortable or activated, or at peace or whatever, feelings you wanna evoke in that space, then you're not gonna be having the quality connection that you want. So finding a way
Right.
to harmonize everyone, in there is part of the art of design and architecture. If you are single and you're wanting to say, cultivate, if you go through your house, like I said, do an assessment, and it's like giving, receiving, and reciprocal relationships, and you go through your home, different rooms, and you're saying, hey, there's a gap here. What if you are wanting to create opportunity for, I live alone, but I want to have reciprocal relationships? It's like,
Mhm.
well, um, do you have a sitting area, that with that's big enough for two people? Do you have at least two chairs at a place to eat so you can take tea, or even a meal with a guest, right?
Yes.
In your bedroom, if you choose to have a partner or want to call a partner in, this may be challenging for some people, but are you able to clear out a few feet of closet space and create and because nature abhors a vacuum and say, okay, universe, I've look what I've done. You better come and fill this up, like I'm calling someone in. I've got room in my life for a guest, and
Alright,
so
so well, I have 2 nightstands because I am open to thinking, like, maybe someone else might need a nightstand in the future. I don't know if I can give up any closet space. I'll have to work on that. I'll have to reflect on that. No, I'm kidding, but yes.
this is just, it's just there are creative ways that you can create opportunity for reciprocal relationships.
Mhm.
Like we see a lot of when there's space in the master suite, to have, even a love seat. Sometimes it's at the foot of the bed, or sometimes there's a couple of chairs where you can there. So it's not only in the bed. There's you can sit there and have a conversation. This is very helpful for raising families. Sometimes you need to have a private conversation,
That's right.
away from the kids about any number of things. It might be about parenting, but it might be about your own stuff. And it's like, and so having a space in the bedroom to have a private conversation can again so help sow solidity and harmony in the family. So that's an opportunity for reciprocal relationship other than sleeping. Again, calling in, a photograph or a picture of an image of, someone that gives to you, someone that offers, wisdom or encouragement to you in the bedroom is fine. And the plants are pretty a no-brainer. Yes, our bedrooms all have to have egress windows. Yeah. So big
Yeah,
enough to,
right.
to climb out. So you're gonna get some light in there. And I love the plants because they do that double duty like I talked about before. And they're low maintenance, so it's not like you have to attend to them every day. It's really doesn't take a lot of time to do. So yeah, those are, everyone is going to find their own way. So here's it. You're actually asking questions about how do we take this big idea, this concept that we know is true, and apply it individually, right? And so the Conscious Home Design book, it really is the big idea. And like I said, it's very refined, it's very simple. You can read it in an hour, it's accessible. I hired someone with a double master's degree, one in social work and one in psychotherapy. And so this person is a practicing therapist. And I said, please read the book and then help me, work with me to ask the right questions. I want to apply these concepts. I want people to be able to walk through and find out how to shape this, what's meaningful for them. There's the relationships is just the beginning. We have our core values and what's important to us. We also have Maslow's hierarchy of human needs pyramid that we
Yes.
get into. And so, before we talk about colors and textures and design elements, let's look at the things that we actually have to dedicate space for, like Da Vinci and success, creative expression, opportunities for creative expression. You want to have opportunities for physical exercise. You want to have opportunities for inner development, some sort of personal growth work, because we all need to feel like we're good at something, like we're accomplishing something, like we have some sort of competency in something. And so, we never want to feel like we know it all. We want to feel like there's still more to learn and grow in that direction. And so that's the lifelong learner. That is the personal development or self growth. And so, however it shows up for you, one person might like this, another person likes this other thing, but still there's a need for self development. Let's find out what that is. How many architects or designers say, what do you like to do for creative expression? It's like And if they forget to ask that question, it might get overlooked, and it might just be like this
That's right.
afterthought that gets stuck in a corner.
Right.
But this is something that really feeds us, and it really helps us keep the spark and the joy alive in life. So it's very valuable to include these things and start at the beginning of the project. And so we worked on it, and we ended up with this workbook that has,
Great.
exercises
Okay.
and worksheets. I ask people, you can get it on my website. It's like $47 for instant download. You get the book, the audiobook, and the workbook as a PDF. Or if you want physical copies, it's a little bit more, but I'll sign them and
Mhm.
mail them to you and do a consultation. So this is the opportunity for anyone, whether they're home shopping or renting, or even if they're wherever they live. This is an
Wherever you are.
opportunity to take these ideas and put them right into your specific situation, because we ask the rich questions to get at
Good.
that. And then from there, now it's like, oh, okay, now I have my real list, because if you're home shopping, Bridget, you're going to come with your list, but I want to make sure that we fill in the gaps, so that it's like,
That's right.
aha, this is even better than I had the vision of my dream home. This is even better,
Even better. Yeah.
even
So,
better. Yeah.
I have a question for you. What if someone is listening to our conversation right now? And in my industry, in real estate, we've run into this. There were a lot of people that had, I'll just keep it simple, beautiful homes that had pretty good flow, and they stayed on top of them pretty well. And I'm not blaming COVID, but during COVID, when just the rug was yanked out and we started being in our homes even more than we were before,
Yeah.
some people lost the handle on it. And some people either, I'm not talking about hoarding, but they just have more stuff than they're used to. They've lost their flow. So, what if someone's listening to us and they are kind of in a mess right now? Is
Yeah.
this a place where they could start? Could they start with your workbook and create the
This is
beauty within the chaos they're sitting in? Or would you recommend something else?
conscious home design meets you where you are.
Great.
Wherever your starting place is, you could say, hey, what's important to me, I'm really a very spiritual person. I want to have a meditation room, or I want to have a prayer room, and I want to have daily connection, to that. But another person says, I'm not, I'm an atheist, but I do like to have some inner development, but it just shows up where I study, or I do journaling, or whatever. And so, I'm not here to say, hey, you have to have this thing. The universal need is personal development. What that looks like is up to you, right? And whether you have a big home or a small home, whether it's chaos or whether it's minimalist, whether it's whatever and wherever you are, we meet you there and then help you just create the next version of yourself. We're always recreating ourselves new. And so it's very welcoming that way. The process it's not an all or nothing kind of thing. It's just little 2% shifts, like the butterfly effect. To the
Right.
flapping of the mathematician wrote, to the flapping of the butterfly's wings in Brazil eventually set off a tornado in Texas. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's what we're looking to do, is these tiny little shifts that over time compound and can have big dividends, life-changing results. Yeah. I mean, not every time a butterfly flaps its wings, not every small beginning leads to a big result, but every big result started as a
Started.
small beginning.
Yes.
And so that's the goal, is say, hey, let's take some small beginnings, some intentional small beginnings, so that it can work. That snowball effect, or that butterfly effect, the compounding interest curve can take shape in our own lives. So you brought up the example of sort of, clutter, or the space suddenly not working for a new evolved lifestyle. Oh, I'm now at home. I shifted my job,
Right.
or
Right.
you know, I'm outgrowing, or is my home really evolving with me, adapting with my changing lifestyle? Kids, whether the two big ones are growing families. Hey, my income's growing, my family's growing, we need more space. Or empty nesters. Hey, kids are gone. Why do I need all 5 bedrooms for just, me, you, and the
Right.
dog? It's like,
Right.
why am I maintaining all this real estate, collecting dust, when I could just have a well-designed, downsizing doesn't mean downgrading. You can have
Correct.
the best home of your life, but we also
Absolutely.
we want to start here today but also keep an eye to the future and let it evolve and adapt. A forever home and age in place. That's part of the art of being a good designer is to allow room. We don't want to make this perfect snowflake that's a snapshot in time and is very beautiful today, but tomorrow it's no longer relevant. Yes, it's the home has to have some adaptability.
Right.
So going through the workbook, what it does is it's first off, it's fun and it's thought provoking, and so it helps you, daydream, and explore and imagine. But at the end of that, it's clarity. And it's clarity. Clarity allows you to prioritize and understand, oh, this is valuable to me. I need to make like the relationships. Once we know, oh, now we can prioritize it. It's not just this vague wish list item. It suddenly becomes something that, oh, I have to do something about this. So clarity is confidence and confidence is speed. And so if you're stagnating and paralyzed with and not making a choice because you're not sure what direction to go in, clarity. And so having the guidelines of asking these right questions is going to bring that to you and say, oh, now I know what direction I need to go in. And if you show up to a real estate agent and say, or to a builder or to an architect with this list, the list you get there, you're light years ahead of the average person who shows up. And so as a real estate agent, if you were to guide someone through the conscious home design process to generate their real list and help them prioritize, imagine how much time you could save from looking at listings, going to look at houses that really are not well suited for them. It's the
Right.
speed that comes from that and helping someone find the true home that's going to fit for them. House A and House B are both on the market, same school district, same price point. How do you decide? Most people fall back on, well, this one has updated, roof, or this one has a style that I like, or I like it because it's
They
one room.
replaced the HVAC with 2 zones. Okay.
Right. It's much easier to find a space that has the right dedication of space that's going to allow you to have your lifestyle flow and then polish that up or improve that. But it's much more difficult to get something that's already perfect and polished but doesn't have the flow for your particular lifestyle. It might work perfect for someone else, but for you want something. And so going through the conscious home design workbook, take an hour or two to do that. You can take as long as you want. You can
Right.
whittle away at it, for a year if you want to, but you can do it in a weekend easily. That is going to help you make a good choice, help you evaluate, your options more accurately for what's truly going to serve you. So because people get distracted by shiny bling. They look at us, they go,
Yes.
"Ooh, I want that." Because everyone wants a wow factor, right? That's natural, no problem. But you just don't wanna get blinded or distracted by a wow factor. You wanna be able to see through it to the actual core function. Hey, does this flow? I have seen many beautiful eye candy, show-stopping, $250,000 kitchens. They got $100,000 of appliances. They got $100,000 of countertops and cabinets, and then all the other stuff around it. And yet, it's a cathedral, right? It's a veritable cathedral to the kitchen,
Right.
and they're very magazine quality, Instagrammable, but the refrigerator is literally 23 feet away from the sink.
That's right.
Try to make a sandwich in a kitchen like that. You go to the fridge and pull out, you gotta walk from the lettuce and tomato and mustard.
That's
You're
right.
more likely to drop things on the floor and make a mess, in a kitchen like that. If you're pressed for time in the morning, it takes too much time, it's too inconvenient, so you're gonna shortcut, and you're just gonna do coffee and a granola bar or something quick. It's fine for a little while, but over years, nutrition levels suffer from that kind of thing. If you're tired at the end of the day and you just like don't want to run a marathon to prepare dinner, then you're gonna be shortcutting. You're gonna either order takeout more frequently, or you're gonna, not prepare as rich, as well-rounded, as balanced a meal. And so these beautiful kitchens can be very impractical, and
They
your
can.
health can actually suffer for it in the long term. And so we really want to not get distracted by the bling and make sure that the function, the form is going to be functional for us and really support us in the long term. And so the workbook will help you do that. Of course, professional guidance, there's no shortcut, like hire a professional. If you want to get somewhere fast, that's why we hire experts. That's why we hire real estate agents and doctors and lawyers and architects, because they're a professional who can help us avoid pitfalls and get to our goals more quickly.
But I do think going through these exercises, when you show up with the professional you've selected, you're going to give them more valuable information so they can help you in a more powerful way. So I think it's great to do these exercises
Well, that's right.
on
Yeah,
your
that's so
for a
that's what I
hire.
was saying,
Yeah.
like, when you if you do the workbook before you talk to your realtor or after or if your
Yeah.
realtor says, "Hey, do
Yeah.
the workbook," and then you do that, and then you start shopping for homes,
That's right.
or,
It's gonna
a
be better.
builder, you can look at it and you can evaluate and say, "You know what? This has a conscious home score, for me, for my lifestyle of 7 out of 10. Here's the low-hanging fruit the changes we could make it a 9 out of 10." Let's
Mhm.
and so you can more judiciously evaluate properties and save time. So a client who comes through my door or a builder's door or a realtor's door that's done the work, the best kind of client is an educated client, and they're light
Right.
years ahead of the average person who comes. And so
Right.
this book is really, whether they do it as the book or they do it on my online video course series, the on-demand workshop, or whether I'm doing
Mhm.
it one-to-one as a white glove service, this is the same onboarding process that I walk all of my clients through,
That's
whatever
awesome.
format it comes in, because I can't serve them as deeply as I'm able to if they don't do this, if they don't let me, if they don't help me, if they just come in and say, "Hey, I just need some blueprints. I need 4 bedrooms, a family room, and a garage." It's like, you have an opportunity to create your destiny, and you're not asking the right questions. That's a great list. That's a great starter, but please dig deep. It's like, why would you go clothes shopping and say, "Hey, I just want to make sure that it's black and waterproof." It's like,
Right.
let's have it fit your body.
Here's a
Let's have it
hefty bag, the hefty bag, extra large. There you go.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? It's like, okay, it may be functional, but is it beautiful? And how functional is it? Is it durable? Is it gonna stretch with you? I mean, it's just so there's so much opportunity, so much richness if people, but people don't know because they haven't been taught. So they don't know what's possible for them. And so that's why conscious home design is this sort of ambassador or this bridge builder between the esoteric knowledge. And even, what, honestly, not all architects are created equal. I haven't found any other architects doing the work as systematically and as deeply as this. Architects typically fall into uh, one of two categories. They're either designers and stylists, or they're technologists, and they're really into the codes and the technical things of how the pieces fit together.
Mhm.
I have a bit of both of those, but I'm really about people living happily ever after. I'm like, what moves the needle on people actually living their best life? It's about people, not about buildings for me. It's
Right.
people first. Yeah. So, yeah, just like doctors specialize, they can spend a whole career just in one organ, and lawyers
Yes.
also specialize. So architects also specialize and realtors specialize.
Yes.
Professionals specialize, yeah? So I specialize in conscious home design, and,
I think it's
I'm trying to let
fantastic.
anyone who resonates with that keyword I I'm happy to share as much as I can with them so that they can, you know, cultivate their space, their surroundings.
And it as you've pointed out a couple of times, it is and there's evidence and data that support your environment where you spend the most time. It has a direct impact on happiness. It has a direct impact on mental health and success at work, whether you work at home or out of the home. And so it is something that if anyone listening to this and you're still listening now, if you are dissatisfied in any of those areas, a roundabout way to create change in an area that seems as if it's not related to your home would be to start in your home. So I would hope that they would look for what you have to offer on your website and possibly get the workbook and work through those questions with themselves. And you know what I mean? Like, even if it seems like, oh, an issue at work is so far separate from it, it's really not. And just start where you are. I am going to tie it back to you brought up our friends, the plants. This would allow you to bloom where you're planted in a healthy and vibrant way.
So that is so true because it's the ripple effects that get sent out. Again, like going back to that in the morning affirming, it's like, there is love for me, there is encouragement for
Yes.
me. And then how does that make you feel in your own body? How do you stand on your own 2 feet? And what ripple effects does that how do you show up in the world now
Yes.
from that place of security, of inner security that you have? And so that how's that gonna change a sales call that you have? How's that gonna change you? How's that gonna allow you to maybe not respond to the jerk in traffic,
Right.
and not fly into
Right.
road rage or something, right? So, like, the ripple effects, again, butterfly, it's gonna show up everywhere, and the results are you can end up just these little 2% shifts. If you're going from New York City and heading to LA, but you're just off by 2%, you could be hundreds of miles in a different
You'd be
destination,
in
with these
Vancouver.
little things. So you wanna exactly. So doing these things, don't underestimate the power of home to color your entire world, your entire reality. When like, the Winston Churchill quote about, environment, buildings shaping us.
Right.
Well, that's wisdom from the West. The same wisdom from the East, is environment is stronger than willpower. That's a quote by Yogananda. I looked at that and I'm thinking, man, that's a real double-edged sword. On the one hand, I don't want to feel like I don't have the capacity to overcome my environment because we have proof of it every day. People are breaking records, people are digging
Yes.
down deep to draw on strength they didn't realize they had, and they overcome their circumstances and their conditions. We see proof of us overcoming our environment all the time.
Right.
But on the other hand, think of the whale, who's takes all of their strength and they launch out of the ocean. The times where we're breaking records or doing these fantastic, indomitable feats of those are breach moments, that we're not habitually living with the dial on 11.
Right.
We're economizing, we go through our habits, we go on autopilot, because it conserves resources. The brain already uses 20 to 30% of the calories that we consume every day. If we had to make decisions, a brand new decision about every single thing
Every
every
single
single
thing.
day,
Yeah.
it'd be impossible. We never get anything done.
Right.
We have to live a slightly mechanical or habitualized life just to be able to make progress in life. And so we want to shape the environment in a way that when we do go on autopilot, it's supporting us properly, because the times where we're not being 100% activated, when we're tired, when we're going on habit, or when we're just not paying attention, that's when the environment wins. Like the tree root, wood is
That's right.
softer than concrete, but that's 24/7 pressure, that constant pressure over time is gonna lift and possibly crack the sidewalk. And so that's the way the environment wins on us, is because we're there so much of the time. So shape it positively, and then your future will shape both in the home and out of the home.
And out
But
of
it
it.
starts within. It's the inner game, right?
It
It
is.
shapes it's the mind body environment connection. If we're optimistic, then it's going to send signals into our body. Hey, we want to get something done. Get up out of bed. Let's go hit it.
Right.
Actually, if the body is feeling energized and strong, then even if we're like a little doubtful or confused in the mind, the body is going to be sending signals. Hey, we're ready to go. Tell us what direction, and it can snap you into focus, and so it goes both ways, whether it's a positive, message or a negative message. Hey, I'm not feeling good today. Better take it easy, nurture yourself today. We don't want to have to go all out today. And so, that symbiotic
Wait a minute. That's
relationship,
an option. Hold on.
if you're fortunate enough to where you don't have to hit the grind, if you have some time
Right.
freedom,
I'm
yes,
just
to
joking
take it a
because I've
little
been
easy.
known on occasion to
Yes, ma'am.
push through that. Yes.
That's right. Sure, everyone has to choose what's appropriate, what response is proper, yes, but that's the in the highest light, that's what's happening, is it's
Well,
a
and that's
symbiotic relationship.
That's taking what I mentioned of your relationship with yourself. You are either giving reciprocal or receiving within your own self and your relationship with yourself. So please disregard my joke. And if you are feeling under the weather, make sure you do take care of yourself and make that a giving to yourself day when you are
Sure.
able. Yeah. No, it's
So,
fascinating.
yeah, it's the I'm just my job, everyone knows about the mind-body connection. My job as an architect, as someone helping with people with the built environment, is to show them how to put the mind-body environment connection to work for them, because there very definitely is a mind-body environment connection. Our surroundings are gonna send signals to us. Is is my life, are my goals, are my dreams possible? Do I have the ability to have a relationship? Do I have the ability to have creative expression in my life? Do I have the ability for personal growth and development? Or do I not feel the ability? Am I feeling like my arms are tied behind my back? I feel frustrated and that life isn't for me. That's a very difficult situation where it can lead to feelings of hopelessness, or depression.
Right.
It's like life isn't working for me. And so, okay, let's fix that. Let's figure out what isn't working and then start to dedicate space to those things, as that's the antidote. And then it mirrors back to you the message of, oh, okay, life, I can, reach some of my potential. Life is full of possibility and happy, and that leads to happiness and optimism. And happy people are better neighbors. It's
Yes.
like you want right? They're just better citizens. It's like, hey, world peace, let it begin with me. It's
Mhm.
like if someone is miserable, then they're focused on their problems and they're not showing up, they're maybe not being considerate of the world around them. They may be grumpy, they may be someone that's not fun to hang out with, but there's also probably not spending a lot of time worrying about, the environment. Oh, is my house sustainable? Am I using environmentally, or am I buying organic food? It's like they
Right.
don't care about these things when they're focused on these. They've got other issues at hand to solve. But if through conscious home design, if we can show people the possibility and open them up to potential, their own potential, then they start to be happy. And as people become happy, they start to think beyond themselves. They start to include others in their circle, in their sphere of concern, and they show up as better citizens, better neighbors, better people. And of course that may lead to, hey, can I leave a smaller footprint? Can I tread the
Right.
earth lightly? I don't want to wreck the planet. Now that I've taken care of myself, is there anything I can do to help outside? So it's like, think globally, act locally. And so that's the real power of conscious home design. In just these tiny little ways, what ripples are being sent out. So
Well, I want to thank you so much for sharing all of this. And you've given anyone who is listening to this, myself included, that a lot of things to consider. And as you said, start with that smallest flap of a butterfly wing. And we really, truly can impact ourselves. And by doing that, impacting anyone who is around us by focusing in on our own environment.
yeah,
So I really appreciate that you've shared this today. And if you want to reach out and connect with Taylor, again, conscioushomedesign.com, correct?
that's
Yep.
right.
And you're on different socials. By the way, anywhere where you're listening or consuming this podcast, all of the contact information will be there as well. Taylor, I would love to have another conversation with you, possibly in a year or so, and we could share more examples and more ways that people could incorporate this into their life. If you're listening to this episode of The Inner Estate, I'd love to welcome you back to the next episode as well. Have a great day, and Taylor, thank you again for being such an engaging and informative guest.
My pleasure, Bridget. Thanks for having me. Thanks for listening. I hope people are uplifted and inspired.
I hope so too, and I'm sure they are. So thank you so much.